Mark Rogers TV talking college football, heading to the SEC where the biggest national story currently resides was Jim McElwain and Florida parting ways just about 12 to 15 hours ago. We bring in Joe Vizzi. You can catch him on all kinds of weather where he does the football and basketball recruiting there. You've probably caught him in the past on Gators Breakdown as well. Joe, how you doing today?
Pretty good, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely. So, wow. This is a messy situation from both a football and an off-field standpoint. So we know that heading into 2017, that on the bright side, Jim McElwain had captured the SEC Eastern Division Championship 2 years in a row. But on the other side, he is considered to be an offensive guru, and the team is clearly disappointed in that area. Then all these off-field issues started just prior to the season with the credit card scandal and the ongoing trials and the suspension of players. They lose to Michigan. They bounce back to a certain extent, at least in the win column, with wins over Kentucky and Tennessee that are less than impressive. The luck runs out. They have more offensive woes against Texas A&M and LSU and lose those games despite, again, big defensive efforts in those games. And so my first question is, as this went down and then the last straw seemed to be, from a public perception standpoint at least, seemed to be the death threats comment that wasn't backed up by the university. How much of this was football and how much of it was just some embarrassment from some of these other off-field issues?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Mark. I think it's both. I actually wrote a column on that this morning for In All Kinds of Weather. You can find me at Joe_VIZZ1, Vizzy. I wrote a column on this basically saying, what led to the divorce of the marriage between Scott Strickland and Jim McElwain. Obviously, Jeremy Foley, much publicized hire of Jim McElwain, the largest buyout of a coach in Florida history. His buyout, obviously, $10 million. Florida had to figure that out. People were tracking the aircraft, flying out to Fort Collins from Gainesville. Very publicized. The paparazzi was outside Jim McElwain's house in Colorado for, the days leading up to him being hired. And then Scott Strickland comes in. Jeremy Foley retires last year in October. Scott Strickland comes in, takes over. Scott Strickland is a money guy. He's a fundraiser. That's what he did at Mississippi State when he took over for Greg Burns, who's now at Alabama. And that's what he was brought to Florida to do. The facilities needed upgraded. There was a lot of money that was not being spent that Florida had because Jeremy Foley was known as being kind of cheap. So Jim McElwain, got a lot of things he demanded. He demanded facility upgrades. He demanded, the indoor practice facility, which he got when he got to Florida. And these are things that Scott Strickland was appeasing him last year when he came that he was going to do. Then comes the Outback Bowl, the press conference after the Outback Bowl. Scott Strickland's in the room. Jim McElwain gets asked a question. Jim McElwain responds to, well, let's see the level of commitment from our administration. That was kind of a bad idea when your boss is in the room and you take a shot at him, especially a boss that was just hired recently, that you don't really know very well. So that started it. And then obviously there's been some talk about, him kind of saying whatever he wants to people and him kind of having a shoot off the hip kind of mouth and to people. And sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. And then comes the shark thing over the early summer with the shark photo. He was asked about it at SEC Media Days, and he was very standoffish. He was very dismissive. He was very dismissive. He was very, angry about it, said his family was being harassed. I think he handled that the wrong way, where he could have kind of made a joke about himself. He could have played it off. And you know what? I think a lot of people would have let it go if he had handled it completely differently. Instead, he was very angry about it. So there's that. And then right after that, what happens, Mark? This players get suspended for credit card fraud. We know that, that was not McElwain's fault, but there were many questions about the culture of that locker room. Is there any leaders? And then obviously the on-field stuff comes, Mark. You have 6 months to prepare for Michigan. You absolutely get waxed by Michigan. The score was closer than the game was. If not for 2 return pick sixes, Florida's staring at probably a 35, maybe 40-3 blowout in that game, possibly. So that started it. It takes a final second prayer pass by a post pattern by Felipe Franks to Tyree Cleveland to beat your arch rival in Tennessee. You barely beat Kentucky on two blown coverages. They did beat Vanderbilt, which they deserved to, but that's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt was oversold from the beginning of the year. So realistically, Florida could be looking at a 1-6 record right now, Mark. Followed that by the offseason that Jim McElwain had, Mark, and I think this was just a recipe for disaster. Looking back at everything, Mark, I think this marriage was destined for divorce earlier this year. It just was a matter of when. And obviously, the death threat comments this past Monday expedited the process. And that was literally the straw, I guess, that broke the camel's back. And I think once the statement came out from the university, Mark, saying, we approached Coach McElwain about these threats, and he offered no details, further details. The university could carefully word what they want to say. The University of Florida has a great PR department. They know exactly what they say, and they did not back him one bit in their statement. And that said to me more than anything that they could have said. And then obviously with the reports, I was actually told this morning that Jim McElwain told the players before the game against Georgia that morning, he told the players that this could be his last game that he's coaching in. And he knew the writing was on the wall, and the players were distracted, Mark. I mean, let's just be honest. The players did not play the game that they could have played on Saturday. So, it was just a bunch of events. So it was both. It was, I think if Jim McElwain was 6-1 right now and not, 3-4, I think he keeps his job at least until the end of the year and has a chance to redeem himself. But the combination of the win-loss record plus the nonsense just was a recipe for disaster for him.
Glad to be joined by Joe Vizzi. You can catch him in all kinds of weather. I got to check out this site myself. Tons of football and basketball recruiting there. Anything else that I know that's what you're in charge of, but what's the site all about?
Yeah, we cover all things Florida Gators. I actually was a part of the site years ago when we first kind of got going, and then the site was purchased by Fox Sports, and Neil does a great job. I left there several years ago, and then obviously David brought me on Gators Breakdown in August of last year of 2016, right before the season started, and we kind of did that. And then I just left Gators Breakdown recently. I'm expecting our second child here any day now, soon. So kind of get tied up with that. So I needed a break because it is a very big commitment. But yeah, you can check us out in allkindsofweather.com. We've been around for a long time, and Neil does some really great stuff over there covering Florida Gator athletics. Like I said, we just don't cover football. We cover basketball, volleyball, baseball, softball. We do it all. And I love basketball. Basketball and football are both my passions, so it's great to be able to cover basketball over there. And speaking of basketball, Mike White's got this team heading in the right direction, and Florida basketball is going to be something to watch this year.
All right, folks, you can hear the obvious knowledge, information, insight into Florida athletics with Joe Vizzi. So please join him on Twitter as well. And then again, the website is In All Kinds of Weather, Florida Athletics right there. Couple questions going forward. First of all, involving the offense there at Florida. So Jim McElwain benefited from the defense that was set in place for almost decades, in a sense of the recruiting of the best talent in the country, or near the best talent in the country on that side of the football. And so he almost had a free pass there. He didn't necessarily upgrade the defense or do anything there. He was obviously brought on to fix the offense. That didn't happen. I don't know if he improperly evaluated the quarterbacks, but he's supposed to be a guy that's going to, number one, select the right quarterback out of the 5 or 6 on the roster and then develop them, and neither happened. Plus, they have just continuously had issues along the offensive line, and one of the poorer units in the SEC along the offensive line as well, that didn't allow the playmakers to do what they possibly could have done.
Yeah, Mark, I think losing Callaway and Scarlett before the season started really hurt, but I don't want to use that as an excuse. I supported McElwain all the way pretty much up until the day he was let go yesterday. I tried to bring perspective and support him and kind of give him a break. I thought this year would be his mulligan year like it was for Muschamp and with the 4-8 season. I had no idea how bad the tensions were behind the scenes. So obviously I couldn't foresee this coming. But I did think that McElwain would get a year kind of as a due to, and I think minus the stuff behind the scenes, Mark, I think he does get this year to kind of to get a mulligan, and I think he gets another chance in 2018. Like I said, it was just a combination of things, but the offense obviously not being any better today than it was from the day he took over is a huge reason. And some actually might say that the offense is worse today than it was when he took over 2 years ago. So, with that being said, I mean, you can't really give him a pass for that. He even acknowledged it, Mark, in his press conference after the game on Saturday. I was brought here to win. We were brought here to win. We didn't win enough games. We were brought here to fix the offense, and it's not right. So, he even acknowledges it. You had Felipe Franks in the system since January of 2016. So almost 2 years now. He's been at the University of Florida. He has not progressed really much at all. He stares down receivers. He makes terrible decisions. He takes sacks when he has open receivers down the field. I was at the Texas A&M game 2 weeks ago, Mark, and me and my buddy were sitting next to each other screaming when Brandon Powell's running 30, 40 yards behind any defender for A&M, waving his arms in the air, and Felipe Franks is taking a sack. So, these are things that need to be fixed in the film room. Obviously execution's half of the way, but, the coaching just doesn't seem to be there. There were reports from Pat Dooley this weekend saying that Nussmeier's been wanting to play Malik Zaire for several weeks now, and McElwain has bucked him and has told him that Franks is going to be the starter. So if that's really the case, then McElwain dug his own grave on the field, Mark, because Malik Zaire should have had a chance to start, I think, after that LSU loss. I think I saw enough there where I think Malik Zaire should have started against Texas A&M, and he definitely should have started on Saturday. Obviously Malik Zaire, he scored. He was the reason Florida scored the only touchdown and kept that streak alive that's been going since 1988, Mark. Florida's the longest running program in the country that hasn't had a shutout. It's been, 29 years. So, and Malik Zaire truly is the only reason that streak stayed alive on Saturday. And I have a feeling Malik Zaire will be starting against Missouri this week. And we will see, Mark, from now on. This is Nussmeier's offense. McElwain will not be telling him what to do anymore. If this offense improves, Mark, then we know that McElwain was truly the problem.
Zaire is also a quarterback that I first saw against LSU in the Music City Bowl, in which he led a comeback against LSU and hit on like 12 of 13 passes. Left-handed quarterback that's mobile and was really feeling it that day. And then afterwards basically played second fiddle typically to Deshaun Kaiser, although he was the starting quarterback and beat out Kaiser, then was injured against Virginia in the second or third game of the season before Kaiser took the job and ran away with it. And obviously we see, albeit with the Cleveland Browns, that Deshaun Kaiser is somewhat good enough to start for an NFL team right now. So Zaire has played and played well at the collegiate ranks against very good competition. Joe Vizzi, you can definitely hear the insight into Florida football and collegiate football across the board. You can please join him there on in all kinds of weather for football and basketball recruiting in particular.